Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, this is pretty classic as I get older, when I discover that I sort of missed all the instructions of what I was supposed to do. So my talk's going to look a little bit different, and maybe you can chalk it up to old age or something. I don't know. I wanted to kind of assess research of past and potential for the cryosphere, but virtually every talk that preceded me already had pieces of the cryosphere. So I'm kind of glad I went in a different direction, because the cryosphere is so central to sort of both NARL and kind of what comes next, that it's too big a topic. So maybe this should have come first for people who didn't know. What is the cryosphere? You can go online, but from my perspective, the cryosphere is something I can touch usually. So it's either sea ice, lake or river ice, glaciers, ice sheets, permafrost, and of course, if people who know me know it's snow there at the bottom is very dear to me, though so are the others. Then I got to thinking, and this is what I mean by it's a product of age. Almost always now think about history before I really think about science. This is how I got to Barrow first. So, or Reykjavik, back then it had a different name. It was on Coast Guard cutter Northwind. That's an icebreaker. So long before I was a scientist, I was dealing with sea ice. My job actually was navigation and ice observations. That's me, a lot darker hair. And the moment I went into grad school, my connection to NARL, of course, got much stronger. That's my mentor. I'm Carl Benson's last PhD student. I was advocating that people talk to Carl sometime during this conference. I hope it happened, because while I can sort of go back 40 plus years with NARL, Carl can go back quite a bit longer. And if you look up here, a little hard to see, this is 25 years ago. Dave Norton asked Carl to do what you just asked me to do, which is assess the cryosphere at NARL. And then I got asked to review that whole volume 50 more years below zero. So I may be the only human who's actually read every page of it, including Carl's papers. So if you want a little more detailed summary, take a look at what Carl wrote 25 years ago when assessing sort of NARL in cryospheric studies. But I want to actually delve a lot deeper into why Barrow, why is NARL in Barrow, what has it meant in terms of what we've learned about the cryosphere, and then more importantly, where are we going forward? This is a wonderful historic image, and it comes right out. I'm pretty sure the archives are in the cultural center there, even Hobson's archives. It's a photo of Knud Rasmussen, third from left there, when they came through Barrow in 1924. And I put it up there because the first cryospheric scientists were those people who had to travel, live, work, and pull a living out of the cryosphere. That meant they had to understand snow, ice, permafrost, and so on. Knud Rasmussen was one of these first transitional people. He was half native, half Danish, and he embodied in himself a deep curiosity, but he also had a lot of traditional roots. So really, the very first sets of cryospheric studies predate any contact in Reykjavik. They come right out of what I'll call the heroic exploration era and prior to that, where cryospheric knowledge was being gleaned because your life depended on it. I kind of bumped into a little bit of that. I was very privileged to bump into a little bit of that, because probably around 2005, maybe a bit earlier, I got really interested in Inupiat words for snow, and I started talking to elders. This is Arnold Brower Sr., who was very, very kind to me and took me to snow school several times. I kind of heard that Craig George is in the back of the room. Maybe Lewis is there. They were both here at this outing. Just see if I can play just a little. This is when you look for snow words, you're not really looking for words. It's a portal into cryospheric knowledge from the past, embodied traditionally. So here's Arnold talking. I'll start it a little.
frost with a cold air sitting on it, with some a little bit of snow, like flakes that collects on top of the ground, on grass. And that's the first snow I know. They call it cunning ground from.
And personally, that was a wonderful odyssey. It led to my just collecting words. The more I went out with elders, the more I could delve deeply into that knowledge, all of which is cryospheric knowledge about snow. I'm supposed to admit something here. And that led ultimately to my kids' book, which is where you can find, I think, the most extensive glossary. So where does cryospheric studies begin in Utqiagvik? Long before Gnarl, long before anything. The second set kind of is pre-Andy Mahoney. Here's a whaling ship off of Utqiagvik. There's a whale next to the ship, and it's surrounded by sea ice. And so there were tremendous commercial interests in trying to get whale oil. I think people know some of this story. So the first sea ice scientists were both the Inupiat, who were whaling there, as well as white whalers coming up. So the next piece, leading to cryospheric science, really, you can't get past. It was the people trying to make these ships survive or finding they didn't. This is several ships. It's an etching, a very dramatic, overly dramatic etching of ships caught in the ice. The third string that you can't get past that leads to the Gnarl lab directly, absolutely directly, and to a lot of information about permafrost is this. This is the oil seep at Cape Simpson, known in pre-contact times, and it led ultimately to the setting aside of PET 4, the Naval Petroleum Reserve 4, which then led to a series of USGS efforts to delineate where's the oil and how much. This is a picture from 1924. Murdy's on this expedition, and they came across the Brooks Range, ultimately down to Utqiagvik, looking at the geology and inadvertently learning an awful lot about snow, river ice, lake ice, and so on. Okay, that takes us right to Gnarl. I love this picture because there are packing crates. You can kind of see some of the same stuff still today. Concerns over oil supplies led the Navy to move in and really take a look at PET 4 in a series of major exploration expeditions in the late 40s. This professional paper by Reed talks about both the founding of the Naval Arctic Research Lab, but really in those efforts. And what I love about it is today's Gnarl, what we're talking about today, has a little bit of all of it still. I'm an inveterate walker around in that location. I was basically up there most of April, May, and June, which is why I decided not to travel up on this. And I walk around, the Natchek is still there, the theater from those same era when those crates were piled up, but then a beautiful new bark building. So there's old and new, one of the things that makes it fascinating. And there is no real easy way to separate the seminal studies on snow, ice, permafrost, and sea ice from the pre to the post-Gnarl period, except that things really ramped up once Gnarl was there. So that's my perspective. Virtually any seminal thing you want to know about the cryosphere, Gnarl made a key contribution. That it's pretty simple. I could cite paper after paper, but really the answer is the Ajax program was mounted out of there. Occupation of Soviet floating ice stations were done there. Some of the original work on permafrost was done there. People worrying about snow precipitation, my particular heritage, that was done there. So you can see why Gnarl and what's its future look like. Well, that big jet at the top, means for a researcher like me, or even one living in the East Coast, they can manage to be right on top of permafrost, snow, lake ice, sea ice, and so on in a very, very short time. Really, I don't think there's anywhere else. I've worked all over the world on the cryosphere. Don't think there's anywhere else. The access to the subject matter is so good. Even glaciers, this is McCall, are actually represented, though not obviously right around Gnarl. And it is an amazingly fascinating world. As Jeremy Casper said, it's still the same old world, changing, as you've heard, thinner ice, more emissions, and so on. But it's still equally fascinating, and now we're studying it with new tools. The other thing,
Matt, if you can hear us, you're frozen. So hold on one sec. We're hopefully get someone on the deck. Okay, we can see you again, Matt, if you want to share your screen and your slides again. Oh, we can't hear you though. We've got your slides, but we can't hear you if you're speaking.
no, it muted me. It decided I had less. Oh, there we go. Anyway,
No worries,
where did people leave off? I'll just go back a little bit here.
maybe go back one slide.
Yeah. Anyway, a community of people who are not only capable of doing really amazing things in the cryosphere, but also very enthusiastic about it and share kind of a fascination and curiosity. So this is the way I see Gnarl and really cryospheric studies in and around Ukqiavik in the past. Technological change, contact through whaling, oil exploration, and everything were fascinating, and they were changing the community as well. That introduced societal stresses and opportunities. Meanwhile, as you heard in the prior talks, climate change, which has a profound impact on the cryosphere, began to increase in strength and in our awareness. So what's coming up next? Well, these arrows just shift in my mind. Technological change, there isn't really a more savvy, kind of teched-in world than Ukqiavik. I mean, I often feel like a Luddite there. I can use my cell phone way worse than most of the locals. So I think, however that's going to play out, that's not what we're going to see. But climate and environmental change is moving ever more rapidly. And those societal stresses are interesting because they're not just local, but of course, global. So the challenges in the future, the platform of Gnarl is still extremely important because of the community and how quickly scientists can get into their topic. The second thing is it's really a crucible for looking at how climate and environmental change are going to lead to societal stresses and adaptation. And I'll stop there. Oh, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Matt.